Welcome to Behind the Audition podcast with your host, Curt Hilton. Listen in on interviews with voiceovers, filmmakers, producers, animators, and much more. Curt, a voice actor himself, will give insider tips to the business, talk with guests about how they got into the business, and be sure to stay tuned to the end of the podcast when he challenges his guests with a pop-up audition. Now it's time for Behind the Audition podcast. Here's Curt Hilton.
Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Audition podcast. On this episode, I got to speak to the amazing voice actor, Marc Scott. Marc and I spoke how having a podcast can be beneficial to your business if used in the right way. We talked about his podcast, his journey in the voiceover industry, the VO playbook that he created, posting value on your social media, and we just talked about a lot more. So sit back and enjoy another episode of Behind the Audition podcast. And welcome to the show. One of my favorite VOs of all time. I've been following him for a while. The amazing Marc Scott. How are you doing today?
I'm good, man. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. And I've been wanting to have you on here for a while. It's been a crazy 2 years now. And I'm going to tell you something. Your head might explode because it might get bigger. You actually inspired me to create a podcast. So you're the one that actually got me one to do this. And it's an honor to have you on the show, man.
Man, don't tell me that, because a few months down the road from now, you're going to be like, that freaking guy, why did he convince me to start a podcast? This was the dumbest thing I've ever done. It's so time consuming. It takes up so much work, whatever. And then you'll be mad at me about it.
No, I remember the one episode you had, and we'll talk about VOpreneur here in a second. You talked about, time, how valuable time is as a voice actor. And, you outsource that. And I didn't realize, I thought, I can figure this out. It does take a long time to edit, produce, set up interviews and everything for this podcast. But to start the show off, your VOpreneur podcast it brings so much value. I just want to personally say thanks for bringing that out to all the voice actors.
Yeah, that was a big thing for me and that's not just with my podcast. That's just whatever I'm doing in general. If I'm going to devote my time to something, I want to make sure that it is adding value to whoever the recipient is. So whether that is a YouTube video that I'm creating for voice actors, or a piece of content that I've created for potentially voice buyers on a platform like LinkedIn, or the podcast, whatever it is, I want to know that it's adding massive value, because otherwise, what's the point, right? And so it is nice to hear from people who are listening to the podcast that they are, in fact, getting that value out of it. So it tells me that I'm moving in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's take a jump in the DeLorean, go back to when you started. What made you want to get into the industry of voice acting?
I got into it by accident more than anything. I had known from a very young age that I wanted to be in radio. And that was something that I wanted to be Casey Kasem, because I literally thought he worked 4 hours a week and had the greatest job in the world, because, the countdown was 4 hours a week. And so I was like, I want a job where I only have to work 4 hours a week. And so I got into radio, and where I worked 4 hours a day. So I was like, it's close, but not quite the 4 hours a week thing or whatever. But I mean, when you start in radio, one of the very first things that they do is take you into the production booth and have you start reading commercials. And I didn't think anything of it at the time. I just thought it was part of my job. But there came a point, I want to say it was at the second broadcast job that I had, where people outside of the radio station were interested in having me do some script reads for them. And that was probably the first time that I really thought, oh, wow, this is like a thing. This doesn't just happen in a radio production studio or whatever. But it was a long time from that window, was kind of mid to late 90s, until I finally started doing voiceover. I'll say I was doing it kind of as a hobbyist, which would have been probably 2005, 6, 7, I don't know, somewhere in around there, that I kind of started to do it. Started making a little bit of money on the side, because anybody who's ever worked in radio knows that there's no money in radio. So you need to have something on the side to provide income if you want to actually pay your bills and whatnot. The idea of going full time with it was there for a long time, but it was a fear, right? As crappy as the radio pay is, it was still the consistent paycheck. And the idea of, going out on my own and doing something on my own where you kind of remove that safety net, so to speak, of a regular consistent paycheck. That made me really nervous. So when my last radio job came to an end, at that point I had nothing to lose because I was already an unemployed bum. So it was like, all right, well, if ever you were going to try and make this work, this is your opportunity to try and make it work. And so 2012 would have been my first year that I was full time. And I barely made it work. But in 2013, it got much better. And then in 2014, it got even better. And so there's something to be said for necessity being the great motivator, right? When you know that you have no other option, it's like, make this work or go back to radio, which I had no desire to do at that point, or make this work or, go to the McDonald's drive-through, which I wasn't really excited about that possibility either. So when you're in that situation, it can be incredibly motivating to figure out, how do I grow a business?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you're probably the third Canadian voice actor that I've met in probably the last 30 days. And it seems like there's a big industry for the voiceover world in Canada. If that seems, maybe I'm just seeing that, but talk about Canada right now. What is it like over there? Marketing. How do you market the same if in Canada as you would here? Is there a little more strategy over there because, the local areas, being on lockdowns a certain time of the year? How's that working for you guys?
I'm going to get in trouble for this. My strategy is don't market yourself in Canada. That is legitimately my strategy. One of the challenges that we have in Canada versus the US or even European markets, if you look at the population of the United States, you guys are around what, 330 million or something like that?
Yeah.
If you look at the population of Canada, we're like 30 million. So we're literally like a tenth of the size. And the rates here often feel like they're about a tenth of the rate too.
Yeah.
Maybe not quite that extremely low, but definitely lower than what you would see in the US, especially looking at like a GVAA rate guide,
Mm-hmm.
and definitely lower than what I see when I'm marketing myself overseas, Europe, Middle East, places like that. And so when I figured that out, I made a point of just focusing on marketing myself in areas where I knew I was going to be able to get maximum value for the services that I was offering. That doesn't mean that I'm not doing Canadian work and working with Canadian clients. I have some Canadian clients. I do have a Canadian agent. I just decided to focus the bulk of my effort in places where I was going to get a greater return.
Absolutely. And I see a lot of people out there marketing themselves, and I want to get into the VOpreneur, your podcast. The value in the podcast is your marketing ideas. And downtime. I just heard one, you had one, all the downtime we have right now, and people are worried about, there are some businesses shut down, but you give those tips and tricks for marketing to help those businesses. Talk about how that all started with the VOpreneur and helping us voice actors out. How did that podcast start?
So when I was starting to figure out that I was going to grow my own voiceover business, I read a book, Gary Vaynerchuk. Anybody that knows anything about marketing, or pretty much anybody that's ever been on the internet, has probably heard of Gary. He wrote a book once upon a time called Crush It. And in his book, Crush It, he talked about starting a blog. That was one of the things that he suggested that you do at the time. And so I was like, all right, well, I can do that. So I started a blog, and I wrote 5 days a week for a number of years. I missed here and there, but for the most part, I was consistently blogging 5 days a week. And because I didn't really know what to blog about, it basically became me blogging what I was learning, because I recognized that I needed to figure out how to grow a business, which meant that I needed to improve my skills in business. So whether it was marketing, sales, promotion, accounting, taxes, business practices, customer service, whatever it may be, those were the things that I was learning. Those were the books that I was reading, the courses I was taking, all that sort of stuff. And so I just started blogging all of these things that I was learning, not really having a plan other than Gary V said to blog, so I'll blog. I would say probably 5 or 6 years into the blog, I started getting voice actors reaching out to me for help. Like, more than just, the regular, like, can you answer this question for me? It was more like, hey, can I book some time with you? Can I do some coaching with you? And that was something that I had never, ever crossed my mind. But it was one of those things where I guess the market started to dictate it.
Mhm.
And I realized that, you know what, you've been blogging about this stuff for like 5 or 6 years, and people probably do think that you are an expert in this
Mhm.
now. And so uh, that's where that transition started. And then the podcast was just me saying, blogging is hard, blogging is time consuming. I have a wife and kids and a house and all these things now that I didn't have at the time. I need to find other ways to add value that maybe are a little bit less demanding on my schedule. And I'd been pressured, asked, begged, pleaded with by the community for a long time, start a podcast. And so that was the next iteration, I guess,
Mhm.
of how that value add was coming. You know, the blog stopped, the podcast started.
Absolutely. And with the podcasting, there are a bunch of podcasts out there. There are some that bring extreme value like yours. I actually started consulting with a local company about business development and podcasting. And talk about, I mean, wouldn't you agree that the value of having a podcast can really benefit your business? Wouldn't you think so?
Yeah, I think if you are putting out the right kind of information and targeting it to the right audience, and I think this is where voice actors tend to get stuck, is because the assumption is I'm a voice actor, so I should do a podcast about voiceover.
Right.
Well, that's good if your target audience is going to be other voice actors.
Right.
And if that's the case, like, so in my case, because I do offer coaching, it makes sense for me to target other voice actors. I got a twofold approach. One, I figure as long as I can keep pouring value into the community and people are learning how to better run their businesses, that makes the industry better as a whole. So
Right.
that's good for me.
Right.
Obviously, the better business people that we all are, the more professional the industry looks, and that's good for everyone. But then at the same time, I do offer coaching. And so if I can put out a podcast that people are interested in, that they're learning things from, but they want to take it deeper, then there's an opportunity for them to reach out and, we can do some coaching or whatever. So that makes sense for me and what I'm trying to accomplish. From the voiceover side, my podcast makes no sense. I can't say that my podcast has ever resulted in an actual voiceover booking, but that's not the objective of the podcast for me. So I think that's the number one thing: is, can a podcast be an incredible marketing tool? Of course it can. I mean, it's a live audition, right? Every time
Right.
somebody listens, they're hearing your voice, that's your moneymaker. So it's just a matter of creating the right kind of podcast, targeting it to the right kind of audience. I recently did an episode on podcasting, how to start a podcast. And one of the examples that was thrown out, and I interviewed Samantha Boffin, who is also a voice actor and a podcaster. And she's like, if you're into shoes, do a podcast about shoes. And a lot of people would hear that and be like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why do I want to do a podcast about shoes? And my point was, well, do video producers wear shoes? Do advertising agency
Right.
executives wear shoes? Do your buyers or potential buyers, do they wear shoes?
Yeah.
So if they're listening to your podcast, what do you inevitably do when you listen to a podcast from somebody that you're really intrigued by? You ultimately go and Google them,
Right.
right? You try to find their website, you try to find their social media, you try to find out more about them, try to find out, what they are about. And then that's the part where they're like, oh, so not only is he into shoes, but he also happens to be a voice actor. Well, I'm going to bookmark that website and maybe
There
come
you
back
go.
to that later, right? So it can turn into a marketing opportunity.
Absolutely. And so you have one of those distinctive voices too that you can tell you don't change it for commercials. You have that typical this is my voice. I'm not going to change it. What advice do you give to other voice actors? Is that a good approach for everyone, or is it just something because everybody's voice is the same? What would you recommend for those coming up in the industry? Like, would you say just be yourself? Because it seems like there are some people who like to change the voice a lot.
Yeah, that's a good way to not book. Look, I was a radio guy, and there is an element of show when you are doing radio, particularly when you're doing radio in a, like did afternoon drive at a hot AC station. It was phones, it was happening. I did mornings at a top 40 station, and there's an element of show. And I have said that it probably would have been easier for me to be a farmer transitioning into voiceover than it would have been for me to be a radio guy transitioning into voiceover, because I was a radio guy for 20 years and there's 20 years of announcer in me that I, to this day, continue to work to beat that out of me. It is really hard. But what we all have to offer is our genuine, unique, authentic self and voice. And there is no rhyme or reason to why, like, you've probably done this. I've done this where I've submitted on Audition and I thought, oh, I nailed it. Like, write me the check, send me the booking.
Yeah.
I nailed it. This was perfect. This is mine. This is my job.
Yep.
And then, a few weeks later, whatever, you hear that spot
Mm-hmm.
and it's not you. And the person that's doing it, you're like, what? That's what they picked? That's the direction they went? That's what they were looking for? And you're like, and your mind is blown because it was like 180 from where you took your audition.
Yeah.
That's the frustration and the beauty of this industry, is that you just don't know. And so the only thing that you can bring to the table that sets you apart from every other person out there doing this is your unique voice and interpretation and delivery. And nowadays, more than ever, it's, everybody talks about the conversational non-announcer, right? They're just looking for people who just know how to have a conversation with an audience that isn't actually there. And so that, it's really, really hard to learn if you've come from a professional broadcasting background where everything is supposed to be like spot on and you're supposed to sound perfect and polished. And
right.
I can't tell you how many times I've gone into a recording studio and given it to them on the first take and been like, all right, let's wrap this up. I'm going home. And they're like, that was perfect.
Right.
Can you do that again though and sound less perfect? And I'm like, what do you mean sound less? And I could never understand what they were saying. It's like, you're telling me it's perfect, but now you don't want it to be perfect. And I could never figure it out. It was because they didn't want it to be polished.
Right.
They don't mind an or an ah or a little weird thing in your voice or whatever, because then it sounds more real, genuine, authentic. And that's been a really hard lesson for me to learn.
Absolutely. So it's like the cliche statement, I have a good voice, so I should be a voice actor statement that everybody says, my voice is great, I could be a voice actor, but the coaching that comes along with it. And that's my next thing with you. Coaching, how important coaching is for voice actors. And you offer the VO playbook. You want to talk a little bit about that?
You should never stop coaching. And I think if you talk to anybody who is at the top of their game, they never stop coaching. When I did my e-learning demo in 2019, I did a new e-learning demo. And that is one of the genres that I booked the most. I coached with Ann Ganguza for a couple of months before I did that demo. Even though that was a genre that I was booking the most, I still went back and coached for months before we did that demo. Just this summer, I recorded a new documentary in-show narration demo. I was coaching with Tom Pinto sometimes twice a month for over a year in preparation of getting ready for that demo. So that's one of those things where I think there's a lot of people that think, I take a couple of coaching sessions, cut my demos, away I go. I think that's a totally wrong approach. I mean,
Right.
I still coach every year. I'm booking sessions all the time with people that are teaching on the performance side of things. Now, that is something that I do not do. I am not a performance coach. I know where my limits are and I play within those limits. I don't do coaching. I don't sell demos, nothing like that.
Mm-hmm.
I can help you with your marketing.
Yes.
And I'm happy to help you with your marketing, but you don't need me until all that other stuff is in play, because I can teach you all the marketing strategies in the world. But if your demos aren't good, or if you don't have the ability to get in the studio and perform, all that marketing isn't going to save you. And so coaching is one of those things that I don't see it as an expense. I see it as an investment. Every dollar that I invest that's how I've grown my business.
Absolutely. And I hear your playbook thing and I'm like, oh my gosh, I missed it again. You offer it throughout the year. When is it that you offer the VO playbook throughout the year?
So I just had an offering in September that just wrapped up, and I'm really excited to be working now, getting ready to start doing coaching sessions and things of that nature with the people who signed up this time around. The next offering is going to be coming up in January. I can't tell you the dates off the top of my head, but it's early January. It's like the first week of January, I think, is when the playbook is going to be coming out again. And voiceovermarketingplaybook.com is the website. January 5th to 14th. That's when it's coming out again. January 5th to 14th, 2021.
I'm looking out for that.
And that is, that's basically what you're getting with Playbook. I've spent a decade as a student of marketing. I have attended marketing conferences. I've attended marketing classes. I've taken entrepreneurship courses through my community college. I've read dozens upon dozens of books. I've listened to hundreds of episodes of podcasts. So I've taken everything that I've learned in the last 10 years of being a student of marketing, and I've condensed it down into about a 6-hour video course. This is the most important stuff that you need to know. All the rest of that stuff is, it's nice, or it's fluff, or it's crap, or it's whatever. These 6 hours. This is the really important stuff to get yourself moving in the right direction and to start doing something with your business. And so it's really about skipping the learning curve, right? I mean, if you want to take 10 years and take all the same classes and spend tens of thousands of dollars, and like I did, certainly that's an option for you. But if you want it all in one place, watch it in a week, start putting it all to work immediately. There it is.
Absolutely. And see, one reason I started listening to your podcast too, I like what you said one time talking about pay to play sites. And I know I've actually reached out and messaged you, hey, what about that? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? At the end of the day, pay to play sites might be good for a little bit, but you need to focus on your business, because what if that pay to play site shuts down, correct?
Yeah.
So focus on you, because say one of the big ones shut down, so those aren't going to come anymore. So you need to focus on building your brand and building your business. And so that's why I like your podcast too, because the marketing about you, building you. And I just recently heard you talking to somebody at the Voice 123. They just got bought out by Backstage.
Yep.
I mean, where do you think the pay to play business is going? I mean, do you think it's going to be one big website, or do you think it's going to be like a Walmart, Target kind of thing? You think it's going to be like that?
I have a feeling that there are a couple of players that are going to continue to move more towards a discount model. I think, for lack of a better word, I think that the more people that you pour into the industry, the more accessibility there is. I think that it's only stands to reason that the prices are going to get driven down. I mean, look at, it used to cost you $4,000 to buy a TV, and now it costs you $400, right? There's 100 different manufacturers making TVs, and they're poured into the market, and supply and demand. So I do think that with certain sites, I think they're probably moving in that direction. I still think that there are going to be some sites that are going to look, it's Target and Ralph Lauren, or whatever comparison you want to make, right? It's Kia and Ferrari, right? There's always going to be a market for both sides. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen with Voice 123. I know they have said repeatedly that nothing was going to change, but my whole argument is you don't sell out unless something's going to change. Like, if everything was going to remain exactly the same, then why sell? Right. So I think it's inevitable that something is going to change in that platform. And I think there are voice actors that are probably going to be really hit by that. But that's why I also think that it is absolutely essential that you diversify your portfolio, right? It's like you would not take your entire retirement fund and dump it into one stock.
Right.
That would be ridiculous, right? You spread it out across different parts of the market so that you protect yourself. I think it's the same thing in your business, right? You've got auditions coming from agents. You've got auditions coming from casting sites. You've got auditions coming from your own direct marketing. You've got auditions coming from whatever other sources that you've found. That way, if one of them does go away, you're not just instantly screwed. Like, oh crap, what do I do now? I don't have any auditions coming in.
Right. Absolutely. And I do see there are some voice actors out there who rely just on one or two. And what you said is perfect. When I started back in radio in 2001, I was in sales and I did the voiceover stuff. And, I have a DJ business, and I listened to a podcast, and she was like, we talked about diversifying your business. And with having two businesses and trying to grow them both at the same time, I would say voiceover in today's world is probably the hardest thing to figure out, getting the clientele that my niche is kind of focused on. Like, I'm focused on, I would like to just do promos and commercials, but I seem to be landing more e-learning and narration videos. How would you, what recommendation would you give to those building their brand and starting out their brand? How would you start out doing that?
Everybody wants to do big, sexy work.
Right.
Everybody wants big, sexy credits, right? I mean,
Right.
I get it. We all want to be able to say, I booked a national commercial for X brand, or,
Right.
I'm the new voice of this network, or I did the lead character in this AAA video game or whatever, right? We all want those credits in some capacity, whatever genre it is.
Right.
The reality is there is an abundance of work in the non-sexy, non-broadcast space. So while other voice actors are out there pursuing those national commercial credits, and maybe they're booking, one a year or one every couple of years or whatever, I just made a couple $100,000 doing e-learning.
Wow.
Because nobody cares about e-learning, right?
Right.
It's like, it's not sexy. I make
sense,
the joke all the time. When I go out and I meet people, they're like, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" "Oh, I'm a voice actor." "Oh, a voice actor. That's really cool. What have I heard you on?" "Nothing." And they're like, "What?" I'm like, "Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah, you haven't heard me on anything."
Yeah.
But that's because all the work that I do is stuff that is, it's e-learning and corporate narration and all of that sort of stuff. Now,
Yeah.
does that mean that I'm not out there trying to get some of this other stuff? Yeah, sure. I'm always on the lookout for those opportunities, but
Right.
I can't sit around and wait for one of those to land. I got
Right.
a wife, I got 3 kids, I got a mortgage, I gotta pay the bills. And
Right.
so, that's why, like, documentary is my dream genre. If When I do have time to sit down and watch TV, I am watching some sort of documentary or some sort of like a discovery, reality type show, like Gold Rush or Deadliest Catch, shows
Yeah.
like that. That is my dream genre, right? If I never booked a national commercial when I came to the end of my career, I would not feel bad. But if I come to the end of my career and I never booked some documentary or in-show narration type work, I would feel like I just failed my whole entire life. And so I waited, though, until I had a steady business with a steady client base, work coming in consistently. Now I can take time to really focus on this other genre that I want to go after and not have to worry about whether or not I'm going to make rent next month, because I've got enough of a steady client base, enough of regular income coming in. So I was able to fund my demo. I said I was doing training twice a month with Tom Pinto for almost a year. Like, do the
Yeah.
math. That's not cheap.
Yeah.
But I was able to pay for all of that, pay for all the coaching, pay for the demos. The website is up and running as of like a couple days ago. I've got it on my website. So now I'm ready to go out and start pursuing that work. And maybe one of these days somebody will say, "What have I heard you on?" And I will be able to say something that they've actually recognized. But in the meantime, I'm not so proud that I would rather starve pursuing sexy work. Give me all the non-sexy stuff. I'll take it all day long because it pays really well and there's plenty of it.
That's awesome. And now you're probably giving people ideas, because my next topic is my last topic before I have this fun challenge with you. TikTok. We have some. I haven't seen you on the yet. I'm waiting to see you on TikTok. There's always some fun.
Yeah, I don't dance. I'm too old to dance.
Well, now
I'll break a hip.
There's voice actors all over, and it's fun.
Yeah.
We are doing a lot of shenanigans. I've been doing some shenanigan stuff on there. So you'll probably have somebody creating an e-learning or a narration sexy thing on on TikTok. What's your thoughts of the voice actors on social media? You see a lot of like demos and stuff on social media. What are your thoughts about that?
Who's your audience? And are you creating content for your audience? That is my thoughts on social media. I don't care what platform it is. I don't care if it's TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever. It's who is your audience and are you creating content for your audience?
Right.
One of the things that happens a lot in the voiceover industry is we friend voice actors on Facebook, and we follow voice actors on Twitter, and we connect with voice actors on LinkedIn, and we probably got a whole bunch of voice actors in our TikTok and a whole bunch of voice actors in our Instagram. And so now we're sharing the same content across all of those platforms, but we're sharing it to the exact same audience, which is an audience of voice actors. How's that working out for you? And I know that somebody is listening to this podcast right now and saying, "But Marc, I have been hired by voice actors." Yes, I have been hired by voice actors in the past too. And that represents approximately 0.00325% of my annual income. So it's, I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm saying it's not going to be your dominant source of income. So you need to be strategic in how you're using whatever social platform that you use, right? So I'm very strategic about who I connect with on LinkedIn, and I'm very strategic about the content that I share on LinkedIn. I'm very strategic about who I connect with on Instagram and the content that I share on Instagram. And so I'm trying to make sure that whatever I'm putting out there has value to the audience that I am trying to reach. TikTok is a little bit different. It's almost like the Wild West at this point, because if you do the right video at the right time and enough people like it, you can just like boom, and you got 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 views. When you have the ability to do that, obviously you're going to get in front of a much larger audience. But again, it's about creating the right kind of content. You know, if you want to get out there and do your promo reads on TikTok while you're in the booth or whatever, by all means, go do that, because you never know who might see that and who might ultimately book you as a result of that. But you've got to be strategic with your content creation, targeting it to the right audiences. That's how you're going to make it work for you, whatever the platform.
And this is why I have you on the show. This eye-opening stuff that people need to hear. And now it's time to have some fun. It's time to do the audition challenge. I think you're going to like this one. You and I talked before. I know you're a big Red Sox fan. I'm a Cardinals fan. I'm still not happy with you guys back in 13, 14? You guys beat us in 4 and all that stuff. But anyway, I sent you this fun script, and it's something to do with Boston. And let's see what you think of it, friend.
I'm looking at it now. Is it Euro? Is it gyro? Is it, everybody always asks this word, right? It's like
Euro.
It's Euro.
Yeah.
Nobody told me there was going to be homework, by the way. I just finished telling you I am not a performance coach. I don't sell demos. I'm an e-learning guy. And now you've thrown this commercial copy in front of me.
I'm telling you, this might be it. I have casting directors who listen to the show, and you might land like a huge, national commercial. You never know.
Yeah, or I might get a big red X drawn through my name, and they're like, well, look, when this guy submits, just
oh my god,
move that to the not even bother pile.
Not at all. Liz Atherton was on last week, and she even did. It was funny. It was funny stuff.
Man, I don't know. I feel so much pressure now. Let's see. I'm looking at this. It's here and it's massive. So what is my inspiration for this?
I would say let's go with an excited guy who just had the best hamburger in this whole wide world. But this is a very unique hamburger.
We just finished talking about how I've spent, a decade trying to undo the announcer voice. And then you give me this very announcery,
excited. No, you can just use your voice. You got that cool voice but you can put a little bit of excitement into it.
All right, let's see. It's here and it's massive. The all new Boston Hero Donut Burger at the ballpark. If the hometown team wins, you get a free burger your next visit. Let's cheer on the home team for that tasty Hero Donut Burger. Messy.
Yeah, see, that was awesome. And can you imagine having that kind of hamburger, a Boston Hero Donut or gyro or whatever you want to say, burger at the ballpark?
No, because if I'm in Boston, the only thing I'm eating is lobster rolls. So if you give me a donut lobster roll, there might be something to that.
See,
we could be onto something. The last time I went to Fenway, and this is what COVID is killing me because I can't go to Fenway. The last time I went to Fenway to see a game, I think in the span of about 12 hours, I ate about 10 lobster rolls. It was ridiculous.
My gosh.
Yeah, it was not good. Now I understand why. It's because subconsciously I knew that I wasn't going to be able to go back to the ballpark for 2 years because of a global pandemic. So it was like, give me all the lobster now. But
oh my gosh. I Googled famous, I guess, things in the ballpark, and I guess donuts came up, gyros came up, and something else. So that's good to know. Lobster rolls. Lobster. I've heard up in Maine they have the Mick lobster or Mick crab or whatever.
Yeah, you go to McDonald's and you get your lobster roll when you're right at the McDonald's drive-through. That's one of the things I love about going to ballparks. Every ballpark has something, right? They just got that one thing that's just so ridiculous, but you have to try it just because it's like, what is this? So that's why I miss going to the any baseball stadium.
Yes, absolutely. And so before I let you go, this is always my cliche question. I'm new to this industry and I'm struggling. I'm burnt out. What advice to somebody new getting into this would you give?
Make sure that as much as you are studying the craft of voiceover, and so that is whether you're listening to voiceover podcasts, reading voiceover blogs, following voiceover people to get tips, tricks, advice, watching voiceover YouTube videos, whatever it is that you're doing, as much as you study the craft of voiceover, make sure that you're devoting at least an equal amount of effort to studying entrepreneurship. And I think that's where a lot of people, there's still a lot of misconceptions about how the industry works. I think a lot of people still assume that you get in, you get your demos, you get an agent, and you're gold. I have 3 agents who are responsible for about 1% of my income every year. And so you need to understand the entrepreneurial side of this. You are negotiating contracts. You are dealing with customer service. You are going to have to understand how to put together your books at the end of the year. You're going to have to understand how taxes work so that you can get your tax return prepared. You're going to have to understand how to do social media and be a self-promoter. You're going to have to understand how to do sales and go out there and find clients. All of this stuff, the better that you are at it, the larger your business can ultimately become. And so don't just get caught in the echo chamber of voiceover, 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 voiceover. Study the business and entrepreneurial side of it too. And the other upside to that, not only will it help your voiceover business grow, but when you understand the fundamentals of entrepreneurship, marketing, using social media, all that sort of stuff, you can ultimately apply that to anything. And so everybody's got a side hustle now. Now you got an opportunity. Now you've got an education that can help you to do more than just voiceover.
Absolutely. And that's why I'm so excited to have you on here. Marc Scott, you are awesome. And again, for those who haven't listened to your podcast, the Videopreneur is like my favorite. And, the playbook coming out in January, make sure everybody gets that. I'll make sure to put that on my, on the website so everybody can check that out.
Right on.
Thank you so much for being on Behind the Audition podcast. You are awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, man. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. To find out more about Marc Scott or to book him for a project, visit marcscottvoiceover.com.
Thanks for listening in on Behind the Audition podcast, made possible by Hilton Productions. If you need a male or female voiceover, contact us at hiltonproductions.com. Hilton Productions, let our voices do the selling.